after a long pause, we are again restarting our schedule with Wednesday general club. So today's topic will be on a lighter note, that will be about COVID and cardiology. Everyone knows everything about COVID and cardiology, but still I would like to brief everything about heart and cardiology or COVID. So let's see what is COVID and how it affected our cardiovascular system. So COVID-19 is a virus which is from the order of nidoviridi and from family of coronavirus. So this COVID virus is nothing new. We know this virus since ages, and there are multiple genuses of this virus, that is alpha genus, beta, gamma, and now delta variant also is available. Virus can easily mutate, so there will be many more genuses in future also. So this is the family which infected human in past also and infected human this time also in form of SARS-CoV-19, that is a novel coronavirus. So this virus, CoV-229 alpha virus, was the common cause of common cold, particularly in children, and it has many times led to moderate to severe LRTI, URTI in past also. Then beta virus family is also associated with respiratory system in form of common cold, URTI, LRTI and SARS, which we all know. And now this SARS-CoV-2, that is a novel coronavirus, that is our COVID-19 virus. And there was in past, there was one genus also which is called camel flu also. So this coronavirus can occur in a form of sporadic or seasonal form, or it can occur in form of outbreaks or epidemic. So what is pathology that affects basically cardiovascular system? To know that, let's start with COVID virus. COVID novel coronavirus is a spike protein on its surface. This spike protein, when it is activated by TMPRSS2, it gets bind to ACE2 inhibitor. Now this ACE2 inhibitor is situated on the epithelium of respiratory system as well as blood vessels also. So this ACE2 receptor, when it gets attached to spike protein, it will internalize the whole complex, and this complex get inside the cell, and then infection will start. So what are potential target for treatment or potential target for vaccines? One is if we can inhibit this TMPRSS2 so that ACE2 receptors cannot get attached to spike protein. So that is the first step or first target. Then we can use some metalloproteinase 17, ADM17. If ADM17 can be activated, it will peel off the ACE2 receptors from the cells, so that this ACE2 receptor cannot get attached to spike protein and coronavirus cannot get internalized inside the cell. Third target is definitely antibody against ACE2 receptors, and fourth target is neutralizing antibody against spike proteins. Fifth target is somehow we can make soluble ACE2 receptors and inject it so that it can get attached to the spike protein and neutralize the infection. So these are possible targets for treatment as well as vaccine. So where is cardiovascular system? This ACE2 receptor is a part of cardiovascular system. Generally, when angiotensin 1 is released from the kidney, it will get converted to angiotensin 1 by lungs or kidney only. And this angiotensin 1 is converted to angiotensin 2 by liver. Angiotensin 2 is again breakdown by angiotensin converting enzyme 2 into various non-active angiotensins. So if these ACE2 receptors are saturated by COVID virus or spike protein, angiotensin 2 cannot be neutralized to its inactive form, and this excess angiotensin 2 is harmful for all cardiovascular system. This excess angiotensin 2 can lead to vasoconstriction, it leads to sodium retention, it leads to chloride retention and potassium excretion, so that it will increase amount of fluid inside the body. So body will have a fluid overload state, and eventually we will end up having hypertension, heart failure and multiple other cardiovascular problems. Other problems are also there that we will come in on further slides. So this is ACE2 binding of COVID virus leads to downregulation of ACE2 receptors, so that angiotensin 2 will increase and increase pulmonary vascular permeability, so that patient will have pulmonary edemas, and fluid overload also has been already discussed. So should we stop ACE inhibitor or ARBs in such kind of patients? No. Because initially it was thought that if ACE2 receptor is involved, we should stop ACE inhibitors so that this receptor will not get activated and coronavirus infection will be of milder category. But nothing sort of that happened. If we compare multiple studies say that ACE-ARB related upregulation of ACE2 expression has query increased viral entry. There was a query harm, it was never proven. ARB also has stopping or starting ARB is also no benefit. ACCH guideline in 2020 says there was no data demonstrating beneficial or adverse outcome of ACE2 inhibitors or ARBs. ESC guideline also confirmed in March 2020 there was no evidence to suggest that ACE or ARB should be discontinued or restart in case of COVID-19 infection. If you look at this data which was published in 2020 only, ACE inhibitors or ARBs, this yellow line or orange line means patients who are neither on ACE inhibitors or ARBs. Blue line is patients on ACE inhibitors or ARBs. If you look at the cumulative probability of survival or cumulative probability of death, more or less it is equal. P value here is insignificant, 0.16. So this data also suggested that there is no relation with ACE inhibitors or ARBs. So this was the latest statement from ACCH which was in January 2021. There was no beneficial or adverse outcome of ACE inhibitors or ARBs in patients of COVID-19. So if it is patient is on ACE inhibitors or ARBs, continue. If patient is not on anything, we don't need to restart it or we don't need to start it newly. What about COVID virus and pre-existing cardiovascular disease? There are multiple studies. This is one part of a study. If any patient is having cardiovascular disease or known cardiovascular disease patient, the mortality of such patient is 10.5% as compared to patient only having diabetes 7.3%, chronic respiratory disease 6.3%. So 10.5% people with cardiovascular disease who were diagnosed with COVID-19 had a mortality. And this data also suggests that this is survival Kaplan-Meier assessment. If there is no cardiac disease, this upper line, the survival is much better. The lower line is any cardiac disease, survival is much lower. And here also the p-value is significant. If we analyze cardiovascular death in separately, if patient having ARDS and cardiovascular disease, this red line is the patient with ARDS and cardiovascular disease, mortality is 23%. As compared to non-cardiovascular disease, mortality is 15% only. Venous thromboembolism is also more in patient with cardiovascular disease. Arterial thromboembolism exclusively in patient with cardiovascular disease. Septic shock more in cardiovascular disease. Death definitely more in patient with pre-existing cardiovascular disease. So who are particularly at risk of severe illness? That is a patient with post-cardiac transplant. Fortunately, unfortunately, in our country we don't see this kind of patients more. But if you look at worldwide data, post-cardiac transplant patients are definitely more affected with COVID-19 infection. Patient with pre-existing heart failure, patient with pre-existing coronary artery disease, and patient with pre-existing congenital cyanotic heart disease. This group is particularly more at the risk of having mortality. Other groups which are not very common, like HOCM, Brugada, any patient with tachyarrhythmia, bradyarrhythmias, and valvular heart disease, they are also at increased risk, but not so much as so above 4. Predictors of in-hospital deaths, definitely age more than 65. Female gender was beneficial actually, so male gender death is high risk for death in hospital mortality. Patient with pre-existing coronary artery disease, congestive failure, arrhythmia, COPD are having more chances of mortality in hospital. Patient who is receiving statins are having somehow low chances of mortality in hospital. Possibly because statin has a high anti-inflammatory effect and membrane stabilizing effect. That's why patients who are on statin has low in-hospital deaths. In fact, many patients in our hospital, we started patients newly on statin, particularly patients who are having bradyarrhythmias or bradycardia. We could not find any cause for the bradyarrhythmia or bradycardia as such. But yes, probably it was a high vagal tone which can lead to bradycardia in COVID patients. So this patient is started on high dose statins with ranolazine and with oxyprenalate. All patients improved. COVID-19 implication of cardiovascular disease patients. So what should be done? Best treatment is prevention. Any patient who is having cardiovascular disease, best is to prevent COVID-19. If at all they get COVID-19, there is strict adherence to medicine and lifestyle measures are advised. Promote telehealth programs rather than admitting such patients, all patients, if not required. Then elective procedures can be delayed. Early testing and admission in case of COVID-19 symptoms worsen, like moderate to severe symptoms, not in mild symptoms. COVID can affect heart in any phase. I think viral response phase, that is early phase, when body is responding to virus, that is stage 1 or early infection. COVID can affect heart in this phase also, this intermediate pulmonary phase also, or inflammatory phase also. And there is one more phase behind this, that is a post-COVID or long COVID syndrome. COVID can affect heart in long COVID syndrome also. So cardiovascular complication of COVID could be arrhythmia, myocarditis, acute coronary syndrome, venous thromboembolism, cardiac shock, and heart failure. How? COVID-19, once it is internalized inside the cell, viral invasion leads to inflammation. This inflammation can be inflammation of lung, or it can be inflammation of directly pericyte endothelial cells of the coronary artery, or it can be inflammation of the myocardial cells. So this inflammation of myocardial cells can lead to myocarditis. Inflammation of multiple other cells leads to cytokine storm. Cytokine storm in turn can again lead to myocarditis. This myocarditis in long term can present to us as a chronic heart failure. Involvement of myocardial muscle or myocardial cells can lead to myocardial damage or dysfunction, which leads to arrhythmia, particularly tachyarrhythmias. Then inflammation of coronary artery leads to endothelial dysfunction. If at all it is macrovascular endothelial dysfunction, can lead to coronary syndrome. Microvascular dysfunction can lead to microvascular coronary artery disease in long term, followed by heart failure. So this all possible ways COVID virus can affect the heart. On long term, this microthrombi or clogging of microvascular system can lead to chronic coronary artery disease and chronic inflammatory disease of the heart and chronic heart failure. Even vasculitis, particularly narrowing of the epicardial arteries, also leads to chronic heart failure and chronic myocarditis and chronic stress cardiomyopathies also. So this is a part of long COVID syndrome. This we have not yet experienced much, but yes, many COVID patients present also with dyspnea as well as persistent chest pain. This could be the cause, microthrombi, vasculitis or stress cardiomyopathy, which needs to be evaluated further. Survival probability, definitely if there is no myocardial injury, survival probability is definitely high. If there is myocardial injury after presentation or myocardial injury on presentation, survival probability is definitely low. How to manage this COVID myocardial infarction or myocarditis, there is many debates going on. But yes, ST elevation MI needs to be dealt with primary angioplasty even if COVID or non-COVID patient. Many studies say that rather than going for a primary angioplasty, the hypothesis behind that was if patient undergoes primary angioplasty and have a stent in coronary artery and COVID-19 being a prothrombotic state or prothrombotic milieu, it can lead to stent thrombosis. But in none of the study did show us that the stent thrombosis rates are more in COVID-19 patients. Although we did not do any primary angioplasty in patients with COVID-19. But yes, even I feel there won't be any high chances of stent thrombosis in COVID-19 patients. So
you put drug-eluting stent only?
Yeah, drug-eluting. So alternatives consider fibrinolytic therapy. Now fibrinolytic therapy, why it was considered? Because there are multiple advantages also. This fibrinolytic therapy can lead to fibrinolysis of the microvasculars also. If at all patient is having high thrombotic milieu, there are very high chances that micropulmonary circulation is also blocked with this clots and thrombus burden. So that can also be dealt with fibrinolytic therapy. That's why fibrinolytic therapy has multiple advantages. If there are no contraindications, fibrinolytic therapy can be considered. And if patient is not fit for fibrinolytic therapy, then definitely there is no other option than going for primary PCI. Myocarditis versus myocardial infarction is very difficult to differentiate. But yes, many times echocardiography can tell us if there is regional motion abnormality, it confirms myocardial infarction. although it does not rule out myocarditis, but if regional commotion of abnormalities, then myocardial infarction is first possibility. Consider type 2 MI also, which is supply and demand mismatch, because many times this patient is hypotension. So there is a supply and demand mismatch. Many times this patient is having hypoxia. So there is supply and demand mismatch. So in any patients in ICU with hypoxia presenting to us with any ECG changes, this possibility also has to be considered. And correct metabolic parameters, correct ABG parameters before jump to diagnosis of myocardial infarction. Start this patient on aspirin and heparin. There is no harm in starting aspirin and heparin. There is no any adverse side effects noted. And monitor progress. Non-escalation and unstable angina can be managed with guideline-directed medical therapy, but do not start on ACE inhibitors or ARBs if the patient is not on ACE inhibitors or ARBs. Plan revascularization later. This is one interesting case of COVID with fulminant myocarditis. It's a very rare complication. It mimics ACS definitely. It affects generally young people, particularly males. There is very high mortality because there is no established therapy as such. Sometimes steroids or IVIG can be helpful. COVID-19 and arrhythmias. Generally, COVID-19 leads to tachyarrhythmias because of increased sympathetic hyperactivity, myocardial injury and myocardial infarction. Then certain drugs which were used in COVID-19 like hydrochloroquine or sometimes lopinavir also, azithromycin also in combination with hydrochloroquine, led to QT prolongation and torsades 340 stat of arrhythmias. So which tachyarrhythmias are generally seen in COVID-19 is most common was atrial fibrillation or atrial flutter, followed by non-sustained VTs, followed by polymorphic VT and cardiac arrest, followed by VT and rarely paroxysmal supraventricular tachyarrhythmias. And even bradycardia also was noted in very good number of patients. So let's skip this is about 20 interval, but now we are not using hydroxychloroquine, so that part is out. COVID and thromboembolism. Thromboembolism, particular patient presented with DVT, particularly ventilated patients, because there are multiple leaders, patients on bed-ridden state for long time, patients with COVID-19, patients with multiple steroids and all injections, all prothrombotic state, prothrombotic milieu or prothrombotic markers are available. And this many patients presented, nearly more than 40% patients presented with any sort of DVT, like half DVT, first ultrasound or second ultrasound. But many patients had deep vein thrombosis. And this deep vein thrombosis eventually leads to pulmonary embolism also in quite a good number of patients. I am not going into numbers, but yes, there was quite a good number of patients. The risk for pulmonary embolism was male gender, elevated C-reactive proteins, and time from symptom onset to hospitalization. And key protective factors are anticoagulant from the start of infection or before the admission only, and anticoagulants with prophylaxis of during hospitalization. So when to start such patients on venous thromboembolism prophylaxis? To start venous thromboembolism prophylaxis for mild COVID infection only. Then as COVID worsens, mild to moderate to severe, it can convert from oral to intravenous doses. Asymptomatic phase, asymptomatic untested with COVID-19 vector exposure, you don't need to start on any oral anticoagulants. And potential for increased risk of venous thromboembolisms are age, bedridden state or stasis, high inflammatory response, high cytokine response, and hemostatic abnormalities such as DS. So, how to treat? Or COVID-19 treatment can affect heart? Yes. Chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine, as we have already seen, it can lead to myocardial suppression, cardiac injury, and prolonged QT interval. It leads to conduction disorder also. Other drugs are more or less safer, except lopinavir, ritonavir can lead to prolonged QT interval. Azithromycin can lead to prolonged QT interval. Moxifloxacin can lead to prolonged QT interval. Remdesivir, there is no, as of now, there is no known side effect on the cardiovascular system. Then, this is to summarize how COVID affected our heart. That was in form of myocarditis, acute coronary syndrome, heart failure, stroke, venous thrombosis. for venous thromboembolism and cardiac infarction. Statin generally should be started early as anti-inflammatory. ACE inhibitors or ARNI or ARBs do not start or stop. Whatever it is, let it continue. Beta blockers, if there is no bronchospasms or airway spasms, this kind of patient should start on beta blockers. Diuretics, continue and avoid dehydration. This is the last part of our talk, that is long COVID. I am not going into details of this because somebody from the audience, Dr. Priyank or Dr. Puneet, will take over on this long COVID. Long COVID has been commonly used to describe signs and symptoms that continue to develop even after COVID-19. Now we are dealing with this. It includes both ongoing symptomatic COVID-19, that is 4 to 12 weeks, and post-COVID-19 symptoms, that is 12 weeks or more. Nowadays we are dealing with more kind of this kind of patients who are already treated for COVID and 12 weeks beyond this and present us with many symptoms. So who gets long COVID? Many studies say somewhere between 2.5 to 15% of patients are still symptomatic even after 12 weeks. Factors that appear to be associated are advanced age, excess weight or obesity, female gender, patients who are known to have asthma or multiple symptoms at presentation. And patient may not have a post-COVID, may not have a positive COVID test also sometimes. Most common symptoms are fatigue, which is seen in nearly 93% patients. And it is very difficult to treat this kind of fatigue. Many patients present us with fatigue, we don't find any symptoms. But chronic fatigue syndrome was found in many such cases, and to be dealt with patients learning as well as physiotherapy. There are no particular medicines available for them. Many patients present us with respiratory symptoms like shortness of breath in 81% of patients, persistent cough. Now this shortness of breath has to be ruled out with cardiovascular disorder because vasculitis or microvascular thrombi can also lead to chronic congestive heart failure or chronic heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. That needs to be ruled out here. And shortness of breath doesn't mean that patient gets hypoxic on exertion. Patient may not get hypoxic on exertion, but patient gets shortness of breath on exertion. That also needs to be ruled out. Other common symptoms, pain and aches in multiple areas like leg pain, arm pain, multiple, headache, neurocognitive disorder, dizziness. Cardiovascular syndromes in post-COVID is palpitation, arrhythmias, very common. And majority of time it is only sinus tachycardia. Nothing more than that. Very rarely postural tachycardia syndrome is also there. Only one patient I have seen that is postural tachycardia syndrome, but can be treated with beta blocker. Gastrointestinal symptoms are nausea, bowel changes and indigestion. Other general symptoms are persistent fever, chest pain, rashes, anosmia, worsening of diabetes or underlying metabolic disease, but probably secondary to the long-standing steroid therapy, and sleep disorders and mood changes. So this is the whole armamentarium of post-COVID-19 syndrome. Very difficult to deal with, very difficult to diagnose, but yes, we need to diagnose. Out of that, I am taking a small part that is a very easily manageable part, microthrombi vasculitis or stress cardiomyopathy. We all know how to treat it, and there is no any change in guidelines. Other part is long-standing thrombosis also, long-standing arterial and venous thrombosis, particularly long-standing microthrombi of pulmonary circulations, leads to dysfunction of right ventricle. And this right ventricular dysfunction also present to us in the chronic shortness of breath. That also needs to be ruled out. Many times CT pulmonary angio misses such subsegmental or small vessel thrombi. So recommended is VQ scan of the lungs or dual analysis CT scan. So there has to be 4-tier approach. One is patient-led rehabilitation and recovery. If it doesn't work, go for generalized assessment, support and rehabilitation. If that also doesn't work, go for specialist consultation or specialized investigations and rehabilitation. And eventually we'll find out the cause. But believe me, 90% of the time we won't